I was brought up as a little white girl, a little white working class girl in Romford. All that jumping around doesn't hurt your titties if you wear a good bra. Sharon Osbourne, I mean, I can't bear the woman. She probably says the same about me. Who do you trust? I don't trust anybody.
This is the Gary Bushell Show on wonderful Radio Litopia.
Good evening, culture lovers. You're listening to the Gary Bushell Show here on Radio Litopia, where tonight I am joined by the sensational Pauline Black of The Selector, one of the Holy Trinity of bands that made Two-Tone a global phenomenon, along with the Specials and Madness. Two-Tone was a collision between the joyous bounce of Jamaican Ska and the bolshy attitude and energy of punk. Jerry Dammers was the brains behind it, Madness and Bad Manners supplied the court jesters, and Pauline Black was queen of the scene, possessing the best voice in the whole new Ska explosion. Pauline, do you ever think back at the beginning that you'd still be going on now, doing it now, 35 years on?
I didn't really think about anything then, to be perfectly honest, other than getting on stage, not bumping into the furniture kind of thing, you know, and doing your gig, Gary. It's a revelation to me that people are still into the music 35 years on, but I think that's more of a testament really to what Two-Tone actually stood for, although I feel that maybe some people have kind of forgotten that along the way, you know, with... for various reasons or whatever, but I feel very passionate about Two-Tone and feel that you cannot go on about it enough because, let's face it, racism hasn't disappeared from the world. If anything, it's just kind of, you know, like changed its perspective slightly maybe, and while that's going on, then, yeah, I'm quite happy to get on a stage and be doing what we're doing. The other thing as well, of course, is that it was also an anti-sexist stance too. Yeah, there's me and there was Rhoda Dakar from the yes. Body Snatchers, you know, bringing up that kind of whole thing.
Well, we're actually leaping ahead about 10 questions. So,
oh, okay. I'll shut up then.
Because we will get to all that. I promise you we'll get to all that. But back then at the start, it was just... Did it feel as thrilling as it seemed to us? Did you realise you were part of something that was so revolutionary, or was it just this week's gig?
Oh, it was never this week's gig. It was the first band I was ever in. I never even thought I was ever going to be in a band. You know, I thought I'd be playing around sort of folk clubs and doing me sort of Joan Armatrading, Joni Mitchell nonsense for a very long time in Coventry before I ever got to be in a band. So I was absolutely over the moon. When we did our first gig, I actually didn't know the sound came out of a PA. You know, I discovered what those big black boxes were either side of the stage. That's how dumb I was.
Yeah. So, as you've just touched on the surface, Two-Tone was about putting pop back into the charts. Fuck art, let's dance was the famous Madness slogan, but it was always more than that because, put simply, Two-Tone was black and white together, the antidote to racism. Growing up in Romford in...
1953, you can say it.
Had you experienced much?
I mean, Romford is a bit of a backwater, it certainly was then. And I'd been born in a place called Coggeshall, which is in Essex near Braintree, in an unmarried mother's home. So us kind of mixed race kids occasionally got adopted into white families because you could only adopt a mixed race kid. You couldn't adopt a child who'd got two black parents in those days. It was never stated. It was that's what happened. Yeah. And kids like me tended to grow up maybe and go to school with just white kids. There wouldn't be any other black kids around and stuff like that. So it wasn't like you experienced racism, but you experienced otherness. You were always kind of, you know, you felt outside of what the norm was. Yeah. It wasn't really talked about because people didn't have a word called racism in those days. They didn't know that running a colour bar down the local club or calling someone a blah, blah, blah was racist. That was just what you did because your parents did that.
That was the norm.
It was just, yeah, it was the norm. It was ignorance, you know.
In the book you talk about discovering other aspects of black culture almost by accident, a cultural... whether it be a jazz musician or, I'm not suggesting this is a great cultural iconic figure, by the way, but Mandingo and things like that. You talk about discovering that, coming across it and building up maybe a picture of...
Yeah, because, they had to tell me when I went to school that you're not actually ours, by the way. Otherwise, someone obviously was going to tell me that if you've got two white parents. So from that time on, it kind of, brought it to me that, yeah, all right, well, you're black, or coloured, as the polite term was then. So, of course, after that, anyone who comes on the television or on the radio or a picture that you see in the newspaper or something like that who isn't white, you think, whoa, I have to find out about them. So I just kind of hopscotched my way through my youth, if you like, until I arrived at Two-Tone, and it's like, wow, yeah, I'll have some of this.
I think Lenny Henry said something similar about Trevor McDonald. Well, he was so revered because he was the first black face they saw.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But didn't you see a band at your school, a black band at your school?
Foundation.
The Foundation. I was trying to think of it. Was
Foundations, yeah. What they were doing at our school dance, I really don't know. But it was one of those, where you're in the fifth form or the sixth form or something like that. You turn up, and we had quite, I wouldn't say large, but we certainly had a skinhead fraternity. Because our catchment area for our school came from Dagenham as well as from Romford, and so they'd adapt their uniform to make it look, much more sort of tonicky or whatever, and have their little short feathery cuts and all this kind of thing. And somehow or another, the Foundations had turned up, and of course I was the only black kid in the school, and I always remember I got this little red dress, white tights, little red sort of character shoes on, and things like bloody big afro. And they saw the only black person in the school, knowing what I know about guys in bands and that sort of thing. I won't elaborate. So they just made a beeline, like, whoa, yeah, I'll have some of that.
How did that make you feel?
I think I ran home.
Did you really?
I ran home. I thought, I can't be dealing with this. So, yeah, I could have been a groupie, you see. The whole of life might have been different.
Mercifully, you weren't. You resisted the temptation. But you resisted the temptations, perhaps, if they've been next. But so that's obviously the first generation skinheads. When Two-Tone takes off, there's a new generation. It's more of a retro thing. It isn't something that's being created as it goes along. It's something that's deliberately looking back. And Two-Tone come along as a sort of antidote to the racism that was there. It certainly worked like that. A lot of Asian people I know who were young then say to me that was the first music in this country they could actually identify with. It's their first identity separate from their parents and something they could completely relate to without feeling, as you were saying, about as an outsider. Most of the audiences you were getting, although predominantly white, you had black kids, you had Asian kids coming too.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot more of a mixture of people coming to see us then, maybe, than what comes now. Not necessarily to see us, but I'm talking about sort of, bands like Madness or bands like The Specials. I was... You really felt as though, this was at grassroots level. You were actually talking to your own kind, and they had the same kind of problems as you, or certainly had done maybe, in their lives. And it was just like, I came out of the NHS. I was a radiographer. So I was working with lots of girls, who'd come from Bangladesh or come from India, and had become radiographers or nurses and stuff. There were lots of black women around who had come from the Caribbean, who worked in places where I worked. And so I'd kind of grown up within the NHS, if you like, from about the age of 21, something like this, thinking that, working in the NHS is a great leveller. When people are dying on you every day, you really don't think about the differences between who's going to save who and who's not. You just all muck in and you pitch in and you get on and doing it. So I think that was something that I didn't find that difficult then, transitioning from that straight into the kind of audiences that we were getting and talking to those people, because it seemed quite natural. Because we discussed those things probably every day anyway.
It wasn't all good though, was it? Because I remember you talking about describing one audience as a cross between a Viking pillage and a National Front rally, or something worse to that effect.
Yeah. But you did probably Hatfield or somewhere.
So did the Selectors suffer much from that sort of neo-Nazi backlash that was around at the time?
Suffering is probably too strong a word. It was there.
Plagued?
It was there, yeah. And for a lot of those gigs, particularly when we went out on the Two-Tone tour, the Specials and Madness specials, we were supposed to alternate the bill every night. as to who was, top of the bill and who wasn't. And that normally meant that we went on first and they alternated the bill, the other two. So we got first dibs, as it were, on how horrendous the audience was going to be to you. And yes, so sometimes, you go on stage and there'd be a whole load of Zeke Heiling kind of skinheads and stuff like this. And so you'd stop after the first song and you'd go off and you might try and talk to them, but it was, preaching to the already converted to the right wing is not really the most edifying thing in the world. Then we'd go off and have a bit of a mumble, come back on, then trying to get the more, intelligent members of the audience, or certainly people with more of a world perspective than the skinheads had at that time. You try and get them on side, like, do you really think this is right? Do you really think they should be carrying on like this? And you throw out a few ringleaders and troublemakers and boom, off you go.
We should say, of course, that not all skinheads were like this. It was just an element at the time.
Well, I mean, I would also say as well that there are probably more fascists walking around in business suits and, brogues than there are people walking around with short trousers and 2XL Brutus shirts.
I was lucky enough to go to the States with you when you went on your... And I do remember there was some... I mean, you had some nasty experiences there. Not particularly life-threatening or anything, but you had... there was that time we stopped and you probably remember this. We had a nice jolly photo session down at Southall.
Yeah.
And some geezers turned up in a van with a baseball bat, snowballs in evidence, who weren't happy about you being there.
No. I think they were going to use our heads really as the balls. No, they weren't happy at all. Yeah.
There was it seemed like a different level of racism out there, did you think? Or?
It was, it wasn't anything that I didn't think necessarily was going to happen. I mean, everybody had seen Easy Rider by then, and they were white, and everybody had heard about sort of what went on in the South if you were black. So it wasn't a revelation, but nonetheless, it was pretty scary, really. When you're having such a good time and it's all quite jolly and you're just thinking, wow, this is Dallas, look at this, blah, 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 standing in there, and then suddenly these people turn up. That was a bit of a leveler.
I remember Linville saying that the specials when he'd gone into a shop and they refused to serve him until he spoke, and then they realised he was British. And
I had that all the time. Had that all the time, particularly because I used to walk around in my little signature sort of suit and hat, so they thought I was a geezer for a start. And then, of course, I'd sort of, go in with my usual sort of hello, which is completely manufactured for anyone who I think is going to... And they'd do this kind of double take, and they really wouldn't. So they were so flustered about that, and everybody else in the shop was so flustered that they'd actually be quite nice to you. But it happened a lot.
What I remember in particular, I thought you were quite fearless out there because the audience weren't hostile in Texas, but they were puzzled, I think. They weren't sure what to expect. I mean, they obviously used to 12-bar blues bands and bands like that. It weren't Los Angeles, it weren't New York. And there you come on and you're hitting them with a sound. Ska wasn't really known in the States, not particularly. But you were fearless. You were out there. You were giving it to them all the time, and you got them all up on their feet, and they were all cheering in the end, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I think that they just thought that, wow, what on earth is this? And you've got to shock these people. I don't remember whether you remember being there. I don't know where it was, but it's probably somewhere in Texas. We went on after a wet T-shirt competition.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, and for your... more kind of sensitive listeners, a wet T-shirt competition involves him throwing a big bucket of water over some poor woman who remains braless under a T-shirt until her nipples stand out, and then they ask them to dance a lot. And people in 10-gallon hats go, wee, away, and things like this. And then we'd have to come on and start doing songs like They Make Me Mad, too much, which was a laugh in itself. It's, but you've got to hold your head up, haven't you, and say, no, I'm above that.
As I remember, I think your only life-threatening incident on that whole tour did involve water. It involved a waterbed.
It did involve a waterbed,
Portland, Oregon?
In Portland, Oregon, yes, because I was stupid enough. To demand a waterbed when I knew that they had one. And so I got the only waterbed over everyone else who was in the pad. Well, what I didn't know, and nobody told me, was that you've actually got to plug them in and warm them up. So I came back after the show and got into a freezing cold waterbed and woke up in the morning with sort of, I was just so cold, I couldn't stop shaking. And from then I had, for the entire tour after that, I had this awful cold and laryngitis, so it served me right.
I don't think you at the time, I was out over the specials tour, they didn't either. I don't think you realised how much impact you were having because you were playing small clubs and it was all small clubs as I remember it. What you couldn't have known as the people in the audience would go away and in 2 years down the line they would have their own ska bands, and you basically inspired a whole new generation of American ska bands, which many of which are still going to this day.
Yeah, we've just been out there, and it's amazing the people who from that time actually come to you, and like they've all got kids now, and they've all got their nice house and all this kind of thing, and they go, oh, I used to be in this marching band, but then I discovered ska, and they say this in an American accent, which I'm not doing, but and people from Let's Go Bowling and all those kind of bands. And it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful to sort of know that that's what happened, and we did inspire something.
I remember you had, I'm sure you had Debbie Harry, you had Bette Midler, people like that come to see you. Was that a surprise? This was back in 81.
Bette Midler coming to see us was a surprise. Not so much Debbie Harry, because we shared a record company, Chrysalis. But Bette Midler coming along, and, because I didn't recognise her at first. She had an old beret on and an old coat on, sort of covering up her tits. And she came up to me and said, "Shit, doesn't all that jumping around hurt your titties?" And I thought, who is this woman? I thought, wow, I remember that nose. And we were best mates after that kind of thing. And no, all that jumping around doesn't hurt your titties if you wear a good bra.
Is that right?
But I saw, funnily enough, we did Riot Fest. I know I'm jumping forward probably about 30 years, but we did Riot Fest in America, in Chicago, about just over a month ago. And Blondie were playing there. And, and Debbie is X amount of years older than I am. And she was absolutely lovely, just as lovely as she was back then, and invited me into her dressing room, sort of sat there and told me about, what it's like being a lady of a certain age these days kind of thing, and we didn't even manage to have a hot flush between us.
Do you ever hear from Bette now?
From Bette? No. She stopped calling after the Academy Award nomination.
Oh, is that right? Unfortunately, the Selector in that lineup didn't survive the US tour, and I think there was a schism you could spot when I was out there. You would see a divide. There'd be an element of the band who'd be at the back of the bus most days, smoking ganja and listening to Pussy
Well, there was
Price.
a ganja smoke sort of divide, really, between those who were at the front of the bus, who were probably hitting the brandy probably more than they should have been, and at the back of the bus, you'd open up the back of the bus and just this great waft of sort of smoke would come out. You could barely see people towards the back. Our band was no different from any other band, certainly no different from the Specials, in terms of that, there was a faction, or factions, as it were, and it was very difficult kind of keeping those factions on an even keel and not ripping each other's heads off and stuff. But most bands go through that kind of thing. I think it's something to do with boys, really, and their kind of hormone levels.
Did you get proposition much when you was in the band?
Mostly by women.
Oh, really?
Well, they were just confused, probably. I don't know. I feel comfortable dressing in my little suit and my hat and things like that. Other people get confused. Don't get confused. Is my only advice. But they aren't the only people. It's not fans who are the only people. Dave Wakeling got confused on the first time that he saw us. I think we were doing a gig in Birmingham, and they were kind of standing there, and he thought I was a boy. And that was when Dave was a little more ambivalent than he is these days about sort of which side of the fence he sat on. And he thought that he'd have a go, and then he found out I was a girl.
And gave up?
Yeah.
Oh,
thank God.
But there was also that.
Well, we have a business relationship
of course,
now. You understand,
of course,
and only for those reasons, obviously. Lovely young man.
The band changed after you came back. There were members left, didn't they? At least two, I think.
Yeah, Charlie Anderson left, and Desmond Brown left.
Was there ever a problem for you with what I suppose you could call the sexism in the early ska lyrics?
Well, I wouldn't call it sexism, because again, like racism, they didn't really know the word.
No, it was just the way you were.
Yeah, it's just the way it was.
It didn't mean any harm.
It didn't mean any harm, no.
Lay down, girl, let me push it up, push it up.
We've been down that road, haven't we? I think the BBC are just still going down that particular road, aren't they? But no, it was just that was the way it was. And you learn, if you like, to kind of avoid it, or my policy was always attack first, and and only defend if you really had to. So from that point of view, it didn't really bother me, but it was difficult, I think, for other women in those days. Certainly women who came on the tour and things like that, who suddenly discovered that, hey, come and have a cup of coffee with me back at the hotel, didn't really mean come and have a cup of coffee with me back at the hotel, which then meant that there'd be some sort of, poor little grizzling hulk of a girlie on the floor in the corridors of the hotel, and going, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like that. Oh, no. And I'd say, oh, come on, have you got cab fare home? No. Well, come and sort of, bunk in my room for the night. So, of course, as soon as we both appeared downstairs in the morning, everybody had thought that I'd got it. No.
I don't think you exploited your sexuality at all. I don't remember.
I should have done.
You should have done.
Neil Davis told me that I should have done. I mean, he told me quite recently, actually, probably about 5 years ago, what bit of that did you not understand, Pauline, that pop music is about sex?
It didn't prevent, the fact that you didn't know, didn't prevent hundreds of thousands of teenage boys and the odd rock writer falling in unrequited love with you.
Fortunately, I didn't know that.
I didn't know.
No, I didn't honestly know. It makes me sound like
bedroom walls and
makes me sound like a complete naive. I know, but I actually didn't know that. I just got out there and did what I did.
What do you feel now about this whole Miley Cyrus debate? Where young women...
Miley Cyrus being humped by that geezer dressed up as Beetlejuice.
The whole, yes, basically, and with the finger. The whole business of women now, it is even more so than it was then. It seemed like you have to exploit your sexuality. You have to be very sexy. You can't be judged as an artist. You have to use your charms to win.
But that was always the case.
Yeah.
There's nothing new about it. The only thing new about it is there are more women around these days who are given the opportunity to make music in whatever way that they want to do it, and also maybe have more control over their output. I don't know how much control they have over it. I don't know how much control Miley Cyrus has over it. Having Billy What's-His-Face for a dad can't help, I shouldn't imagine. But anyway, it's likely to send you down that route, isn't it? But I certainly wouldn't kind of jump on the bandwagon like, Skinner O'Connor did and whoever else it was. Well, I think Annie Lennox has been out there, hasn't she? She's been saying something.
Sharon Osbourne even.
Sharon Osbourne? What on earth has she got to say about anything?
I do think it's a bit strange. Sharon, who sends people she doesn't like boxes with turds in, little presents.
Really?
That's what Sharon does.
Oh, well, I don't. I mean, all power to her, really. She can muster one up. She probably has some minioning doing that, I would imagine. I really don't know. Probably Ozzy does it. She just collects it up like she does the dogs. Who knows? But more to the point, who the hell cares? I mean, I can't bear the woman. She probably says the same about me. But I don't know what these women are doing, for heaven's sake. She is primped and kind of, with a navel on the end of her nose and God knows what. I really cannot understand how they can start having a go at some young girl, who's in full possession of her beauty and all the rest of it, and wants everyone to know about it. What's wrong with that? It's not necessarily music I would listen to, but I'm certainly not going to have a go at it. We've all done things when we were young girls, and all right, maybe not on primetime television, but I mean, that's by the by. That was only lack of opportunity, probably. But she's just trying to explore her creative output. I would put it like that. I have more kind of, I would say, what on earth is that bloke doing behind her?
Who were your...
Oh, Diana Ross. I love Diana Ross.
Yeah.
I love Joni Mitchell. You know, I was not partisan. It was, I love the clothes that they wore. I love the confections they wore on their heads. You know, I love Joni Mitchell for being sort of, you know, slightly goofy and having this soprano voice and having these weird lyrics and rhythms and playing her own guitar and all those kind of things. I loved all that, and I didn't care whether they were black or white. As long as they were women and they were doing it, then great.
The Stones you liked too, I think, at the time.
I did like the Stones, yeah, but that's because he looked like a girl.
Yeah.
He did look like a girl back then. He doesn't look like a girl now. He looks like a very raddled girl now.
You liked his moves, didn't you?
I loved his moves. Well, he came to a gig as well in when we played at Hurrahs, was it, in New York. And I had a headache that night. Silly cow. I went home. I went back. Well, I didn't go home. I went back to the hotel, and there he was, and no one told me he was there. Tears, violins. Gary is unimpressed.
How old was he then? How old was he then?
Oh, how old was he? Well, I don't know. I suppose he must have been late 30s. Yeah, still bonkable.
The great could-have-beens.
The great could-have-beens, yeah. I was so jealous of Marsha Hunt. I can't tell you.
Oh, and you met Marsha Hunt, didn't you?
Yeah. First thing Marsha Hunt ever did,
yeah.
Right? Myself and Neil Davis, the selector, she came to interview us, I think, at... where was that place that everyone stayed in Los Angeles? The Tropicana in those days. And she came to interview us along with a whole load of other people and that. And as soon as our keyboard player, Desmond Brown, clapped eyes on her, he went, "Oh, I want your fucking babies." Genetically impossible, but interesting, and not a bad calling card for sort of, you know, getting a really great interview out of this person. Fortunately, she overlooked that and took Neil and myself to her house, which was a very humble abode at the time. And the first thing she did, right, was not, "Do you want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea?" No, "Come and look at my child."
Come look at you.
Her child.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And we did. And it was she was the spitting image of Mick Jagger, you know, and it was like... It was weird. You know, you go, yes, see where you got that one from. And you know, off it went. But she was a very nice lady indeed.
Now, Neil, who you've referred to, of course, for people who aren't up on the history of the band, Neil was the creator of the Selector, wasn't he?
He was indeed.
The B-side of the first special single, Gangsters.
Yeah, it wasn't the B-side, it was a double A-side.
Double A-side.
I have to stick up for Neil here, because if he was here, he would tell you that. It was John Peel did think it was a B-side. He thought the Specials had actually done it. And Neil actually had to ring in to John Peel's show to tell them, "Nope, that's me. Neol. Neil."
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And ER on the Selector.
Yeah.
He wrote the first three hits, didn't he? You had three mega hits. They were
On My Radio, 3 Minute Hero.
Missing Words.
And Missing Words, yes.
And you were really unlucky, I felt. Fisted by fate, you might say, because there you had...
Oh, that sounds painful.
You had a great song. I thought it was a great song for the next album, and I think it was called Celebrate the Bullet. And you recorded it, and in between recording it and it being released, John Lennon was shot dead, unfortunately, tragically, and your record was off every playlist.
Well, the main thing was that Ronald Reagan was shot.
Oh.
Unfortunately, that killer did not have such good aim. It was... well, I mean, it just killed it dead. I think it was Mike Reid. Neil still holds an amazing grievance to Mike Reid about that. He just refused to play it. They obviously didn't get the concept of irony, but then I didn't. They're Radio 1. I never did expect.
Why would they? How would they?
Well, how would they even know that the word existed? Although I would imagine they probably know it exists now. So you just have to wait long enough, and they will get their comeuppance.
Was that the end? Was that the last single? Celebrate the Bullet?
That was the last single. Yeah, I mean, it killed the single. It killed the album. And from then on, really, it was kind of a slippery path down to new romanticism.
Yeah.
And Spandau Ballet, of course, were on Chrysalis. Where we
was that what made you think, I can't do this anymore? Because you walked away after that, didn't you?
I didn't walk away. I ended up being managed by Alan Edwards, who has Outside Organisation now. And he was managing Hazel O'Connor at the time. We were both two nice young lasses from Coventry. And he thought he could sort of, do something, salvage my career in some way or another. And, like, you could do presenting, you could do acting, you could do this, you could do that. And these are things that I'd never ever thought about before.
Oh, so it was Alan who put those thoughts in your head to do that?
Yeah.
And this is where
he didn't put those thoughts in my head.
Or encourage.
He opened up avenues whereby I could realise these things. Those thoughts had already, to a certain extent, been in my head because Dance Craze had come out. And just prior to Dance Craze coming out, Quadrophenia had come out. And I knew, like Phil Daniels, and I knew Trevor Laird, who plays the pill popping rude boy in Quadrophenia. And he was getting a director's ticket at that time and was going to direct his first play, and which I ended up being in. And it kind of snowballed from there, really. And I just thought, acting, yeah, well, I'll give that a go. It really was like that. It was...
You enjoyed the acting experience?
Yeah, I did it for 10 years. It was absolutely amazing. Well, longer than 10 years, really.
You played Billie Holiday, didn't you?
I did play Billie Holiday, yes.
And at what stage in this 10-year period did you end up with Bob Carroll-G's doing the TV show?
Oh, that was quite early on. The first thing I did after leaving the Selector was Black on Black came along, and also I got this kids program called...
So Black and Black was a series?
That was a serious series, and that was like the first time really black people had been on the telly doing what black people do, i.e. getting other black people on to perform, talk about what they were doing creatively, culturally, any of those kind of things. And it was quite exciting times because there weren't that many black people on the television that weren't in Top of the Pops playing music. There weren't really even any footballers much then. So it was a bit of a groundbreaking programme. And it was Channel 4, of course, and Channel 4 was new.
And it was 3 years before the Taverniers on EastEnders, if I remember.
Yeah.
Who did you have on? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh, we had on everybody. I mean, if you were black or any version of black that you might be able to think of kind of thing, you were on that show. I mean, we had Yellow Man on. We had, Nina Simone on. We had Eartha Kitt on there. I interviewed Coretta Scott King. I interviewed Julian Bond, who was a senator at that time. And all these people are still around today, particularly with Obama being in the White House now. It was an incredible time. I got to meet all my heroes and heroines at that time, and I had a wonderful time.
And at the other end of the scale, Spit the Dog.
Yeah, well, there was Spit the Dog, yes. Yeah. I don't think Spit the Dog was the worst, actually. I'll tell you what the worst was. The worst was Dougie from Bad Manners. Dougie has buzzwords for certain things. Which I won't give away. But anyway, one of them was a word called grumble.
Okay, is that rhyming slang? I think it is.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he'd obviously been plied after they performed. I had to interview him to get this word, grumble, into the conversation. Yeah. So I'm sitting there like a complete and utter novice, not knowing what the hell's going on. Being talked to by somebody who looks sort of akin to a bumblebee. About grumble. There was grumble and grimble. I now know what they mean, Dougie.
He's a shocker, that boy. Did he tell me? Did he have the bad stomach back? I mean, this is going into areas we don't really want to go into. But did he have the bad stomach on stage back then, or
what do you mean by bad stomach?
The inability to control his bowels.
Oh, I've always heard that he'd sort of. Well, I don't know about that. I only really remember him from, when we used to do Electric Ballroom and stuff like that, and when they were doing Dance Craze. I never used to notice him going off at that time. What, you mean in the kind of farting capacity, or he actually had to go up and evacuate his bowels?
He didn't actually go off when he evacuated.
This is NHS speak. I'd just like to say that. Evacuate.
Actually, we are going into areas we shouldn't really go into.
I'm sure many have been there before.
I'd hate to be the person who cleared up the stage, is what I'm saying. So, okay, this is fantastic. But then on the... you were saying to me on the show you did with Bob Cowdees, you had a lot of people you knew from prop bands coming on as guests.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, Dex's Midnight Runners. I mean, he came back in his Come On Eileen days and everything, and turned into a load of Irish tinkers. And of course, they were number one. And there's me sat there like a patsy, sort of interviewing Spit the dog, and he's the more interesting character. It was like your Room 101, that programme. Because all these bands would be coming through, and you'd be sat there, and you'd be thinking, God, I could be doing that. I could be doing that. So, yeah, that was character forming.
1991. You rejoined the Selector?
No, I didn't
did you
rejoin the Selector. I'd say we reformed. I had a phone call from Dougie, who said, I'm thinking of getting this thing together called Busters All Stars. Do you fancy coming along? And we're doing a gig at, I think it was Nottingham Rock City, and they were doing another gig at the borders of Germany and whatever country that is, the borders onto Holland, I think, a place called Aachen. And I said, hey, I mean, I don't mind coming and doing this. That would be great. You get your band to sort of learn the tunes and everything, but I think Neil Davis ought to be involved as well. So I rung up Neil, and Neil said, yeah, well, let's just go and do it, sort of thing. So off we poddled and was introduced to Dougie's wonderful abode in Stamford Hill.
He's in Bulgaria now.
Yeah, is he?
He's got 27 properties in Bulgaria.
He's got 27. None of them have got running hot water.
One of them's got a roof.
One of them's got a roof. That sounds about like it. Yeah, well, Stamford Hill had a roof. It just didn't have any running hot water or any sanitary ware. And so, yeah, we went off and did that. And to this day, he accuses me, and I think that this is wrong because it didn't happen that way. But anyway, two members of his band, Nick Welsh and Martin Stewart, sidled up to me and Neil and said, do you fancy getting the Selector together? And we went, well, what can you do? He said, we could get a band together and we could go out, we could go and do some gigs around the UK, and we can go to America. So Neil and I thought about it for a nanosecond, said, oh, all right then, not thinking anything was going to happen. And bless their cotton socks, it did.
15 years worth, wasn't it?
Yeah, 15 years worth, yes. Well, 2 years, really, really great, and probably about 13 years of what was I doing?
But a lot of studio albums too, didn't you? A
lot of studio albums. I mean, I enjoyed writing with Nick. We did loads of things, at that time. We went off and we did Three Men in Black with Jean-Jacques Burnel and Jake Burns from Stiff Little Fingers, and Dave Wakeling was in there at one time, and Rhoda Dakar came on as well, and Rhoda used to come and sing in the middle of the set sometimes. That was always great fun. Yeah, we had good fun, but I've always just kind of, I don't know, rather naively, I suppose, just sort of thought of music as, these are a really jolly bunch of people to be with, and I'm having a really, really good time. This sounds like sort of the Famous Five or something, doesn't it, really? But it's my approach to it, really. If I'm having a good time, I see no reason particularly to stop. The business side of it has always completely gone out the window. But I'm not so stupid now.
Were you making a decent living from it then, or just ticking over?
Oh no, just making a living, really, just ticking over. It was, otherwise wouldn't I have a bloody great mansion probably like you somewhere?
Yes. Why did you stop?
Why did I stop?
The second time, yeah.
I got bored. I couldn't see what we were doing, where we were going, or I just knew I wanted something better. And also I wanted to write my memoir.
Which is called?
Black by Design.
Black by Design, published by Serpent's Tail.
Published by Serpent's
Tail. Still available.
Indeed.
Second pressing, second print run.
Yeah.
Selling well?
Yes, and it was released in America last year, and, I sell it at gigs, and it's just really great because you can sort of, the amount of people who come up to me at gigs and go, God, I really like that book, blah, 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 you know, and this happened to me and things. I go out and do readings with it. And
was
stuff.
it a cathartic experience, writing it?
No, X-Lax is a cathartic experience. I don't think you should treat a book in that way. What I didn't want was something that was just like a potted history, like some diary form of all these things that I ever read. And the main thing about it as well was that it was a woman's perspective on two-tone, or certainly that was part of it. But it couldn't just be that. You know, the Selector had been in existence 18 months in two-tone. It would have been a very short book, wouldn't it? No, I just wanted to say something a little more because, you know, at the time we're living now, we have replaced the idea of racism with a word called multiculturalism, and everyone's coming to terms with that, what it means for us. And being a product, if you like, of multiculturalism, I having a black father and a white mother, I think that I have something to say about this because I'd spent most of my youth as this little kind of eavesdropper in a white family, which was predominantly had racist ideas, even though they had adopted me. But that's just the way things were back then. And I felt that I had something to say, which was not only about kind of the part of me that identified with black people, but also the part of me that identified with white folk too. And I wanted to put that down in a book. And really, that's what it means, is black by design. I was brought up as a little white girl, a little white working class girl in Romford. If you like, I had to discover my own blackness. And I feel pretty much that's what this country is doing. It's discovering that it has to share with people that once they colonised.
There's a passage in the book which is quite uncomfortable too, where you talk about the time when you were a young girl, I think secondary school age, but when you were inappropriately touched by a friend of your brother's. Was that a hard thing to talk about? Or?
It's for all those women who have been divulging their own stories, say over the past year since the whole thing about Jimmy Savile came out and all of that. I feel certainly an affinity with them and their stories because they weren't believed. It wasn't what happened. Things happen like that. They certainly happened like that's the way things were back then, kind of thing, to a certain extent. I know a lot of women who've had very similar experiences. That really wasn't what I wanted to put across. What I wanted to put across was that you are not believed. And it is the not being believed that is the damaging part of it. I find that far more damaging than what actually happened. You can process what happened, and you can sort that out for yourself as the years go by. What you cannot sort out is when people who should love you unconditionally do not believe you. And when somebody who perpetrated the crime can spin the story in such a way that you are at fault. That is what is damaging, and that is what is damaging to young people when things like that happen.
Because who do you trust?
Indeed, who do you trust? I don't trust anybody. Least of all you.
I have never inappropriately touched anyone.
I can believe that, Gary.
Not even myself. Oh, maybe. Hold on. We're getting there. I did know, on a more trivial note. Frivolous was the word I was looking for. More frivolous.
Trivial, I like that.
There is a lot, obviously, there's a big chunk of your life which you haven't gone into, where you stop early with the band stuff.
Oh, you haven't got the second edition then?
Ah, no.
I did bring it up to date.
Oh, I was going to say, is there enough for a second volume? I was going to suggest.
Oh, a second volume. Oh, well, that'll have to come way later.
Oh, okay.
I intend to live a long time.
So, okay, the new edition is up to date with all the other Selector stories.
It's up to date in terms of bringing the band back to life, if you like. And that was something that I have done with the great help of Gaps Hendrickson, who was the other original singer in the band, and would have been with the help of Neil Davis if Neil Davis hadn't decided that he wanted to go off and form his own version of the Selecter.
Why did that happen? Because
it was one of those awful serendipity moments where on the 1st of June in, I believe it was 2010, that we both announced that there were 2 separate versions of the Selecter, and neither one knew about the other. I didn't know that he was doing that. The previous year, all of us had, the original band, had pretty much sat down and talked about maybe reforming and doing something. The Specials had been back together. Linville Golding had been kind of instrumental in maybe getting us to talk to each other. And it looked as though possibly something was going to happen. And then for some reason or another, I disappeared off to work with somebody in Argentina, just do a couple of gigs with them. And that was really great. And during that period of time, Charlie Anderson turned up in Coventry and just scuppered the whole thing. And Neil kind of washed his hands of the whole business and then presumably he decided at that time, he would get something entirely new together. And we had a very, very long conversation. Not many people know this. We had a very long conversation in the summer of 2010, which unfortunately ended acrimoniously because neither of us really had any kind of fallback position. It was one of us had to dump the band that we had formed. And unfortunately, Gaps and I thought that it would be much easier for him to come on board with us, i.e. having the guitarist and the original singers there, than it was really for him to carry on with an unknown singer. And everybody else unknown in the band doing what was really an instrumental version, and people not really knowing or having to hear on my radio being sung by a bloke. And I couldn't really get to what had been the problem, where this whole thing had kind of come off the rails, because only the previous year we'd done an acoustic thing in the city centre in Coventry, him and myself and H from the drummer, the original drummer, and we'd gotten along fine. So I never really understood why. He knew I was writing the memoir. In fact, he gave me some of the information out of his own personal diaries, which helped no end. And I've never really got to the bottom of it, but he will not talk to either myself or to Gaps. And we can be occupying the same space and he will blank both of us. And I really don't understand. So if you ever hear this, Neil, I don't understand. So
if Neil's listening, you'd be open for a reunion or a reproach?
I would certainly be open to talking.
Yeah. I always thought it was strange that the Specials came back without Jerry.
Gary just did an impression of somebody playing the keyboards. Yes, it was, they had a similar experience, I suppose, except I don't think that they talk quite so openly about it, maybe as what I do. Jerry was the founding father of everything. Yeah. Everything, without a shadow of a doubt. And I feel that one of the reasons really why the Specials have been kind of shoehorned into only being able to do those 2 albums and nothing else, the first 2 albums, has been because Jerry hasn't been there. I'm sure that they would have had new material and all sorts of things.
I think he wanted to go down the route of doing new material. He wanted to expand. He didn't want it to be just a retro show. And
no.
Like yourselves, you've done new albums, at least 2 in recent years,
We've done, because we felt that we had to. We had to build a band. We had to prove who the Selecter were again. I mean, it's good for us because the Selecter is in the singular. It's been through numerous incarnations, some of which Neil has been involved in and others that he hasn't, some that, Gaps has been involved in and others that haven't. And so it's kind of a movable feast and it's had a wide span. But I think the great thing about us is that there isn't another 2-tone band that has a male-female. up the front, which means that we can expand what we do in terms of what we say, what we sing, the way we present it. It is unique. None of the other bands do that. So it didn't matter to us. We could tear up the rule book, do new stuff. It didn't matter. If people liked it, it was great. If they didn't like it, then okay, just listen to the stuff off Too Much Pressure or the Celebrate the Bullet album. But fortunately, people have kind of across the board kind of liked it. And so that's been great for us, which meant that, next year, which is our 35th anniversary, we can say, all right, since you've liked all this new stuff, let's go back to the beginning. Let's do the Too Much Pressure album for you. And people seem to really like that idea, which I do as well, because then you can show how much we've grown, how much things have changed, and all those kind of things. You have to own your history, not pretend it's not there, not sweep it under the carpet, all those tricky bits like, oh yeah, we have musical differences. Not go there. Yeah, we have musical differences. We had all kinds of other interesting differences that don't get said. And I don't understand why the Specials couldn't do that.
It's tragic, I think, really.
What money, though?
They were getting paid huge amounts of money.
Well, the thing is that it's a brand. It's a brand, and you've got to look at it as a brand, and you've got to look at it as business. I always remember Linville turning around to us and saying, I think when Charles Bembridge, who's the original drummer, turned around and said, oh, what about, a support slot or something like that? And I just turned around to H and I said, look, do not beg. You do not beg these people for a gig. We go out, if we're going to get together, we go out as the selector and we get our audience. It's not crumbs off the table time here. And I always remember Linville turning around and saying, it's business, man, it's business. And I thought, yeah, it's business.
What would today's Pauline tell the Pauline of 1980 if you had the chance to tell her anything?
Do exactly the same as you have done, girl, just make more money at it.
And apart from Jagger, any regrets, any of that history?
Any regrets? Oh, no, you should never regret anything at all. Never regret. Always look forward. I always look forward. Because what's coming is just as good. This time last year, I didn't think that this band would be in a position, where we'd been out to America 3 times, where we were on tour out with Pill and things like this. And yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And at our ages, it really doesn't matter.
We should actually mention this. You're on tour at the moment with Public Image. Mm-hmm. Just started. Where are you going to be on Monday when this will be on air?
Shepherd's Bush Empire.
Excellent. And you're also working on a novel?
Yeah, I'm working on a novel. It's written, actually. The first draft is written. So hopefully this might come out in 2015. And also Black by Design has been optioned for a film.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Called Rude Girl, if it happens. That's the word.
35 years.
I know. Took a long time, but we got there in the end.
Pauline, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure,
Wonderful to see you. Wonderful to talk to you. And good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Wicked. This has been the Gary Bushell Show on wonderful Radio Latopia. Check us out at latopia.tv/Gary.